Now, I've given this a lot of thought in the last couple of days, and after much consideration and hard debate within myself, I think I can finally come to the conclusion and officially say that the Tawny Man trilogy is the greatest work of fantasy that I have ever read. What's up, guys, and welcome back to 115 Reading. My name is Ethan, and I just finished Fool's Fate, which means I just finished the Tawny Man trilogy. This is the third book in the Tawny Man trilogy. The Tawny Man trilogy is the third series in Robin Hobb's Realm of the Elderlings series, which it's a series of 5 separate sub-series. And so I am now officially more than halfway through my reading of this series, and I have to say that despite some problems that I did have with Fool's Fate, it is my least favorite of the 3 in this trilogy. I still think that the way that this trilogy emotionally impacted me and spoke to things that I'm going through in my life right now, it is for those reasons that the Tawny Man trilogy, for me, is the best work of fantasy that I've ever read up to this point in my life. So let's get some of my minor complaints out of the way. Because Fool's Fate is my least favorite of the 3. I think I preferred Fool's Errand and Golden Fool just a little bit to Fool's Fate, and there are a couple of reasons for that. Reason number 1, the pacing was a little more off to me in Fool's Fate than in the other 2 books. Funnily enough, I think I preferred the slice of life pacing in Golden Fool to the main plot journey in Fool's Fate. There was a stretch in the beginning ish of Fool's Fate where it was after the characters had officially set off on their quest to Aslevial, but before they got there, that I found a particularly slow portion of the book. And what really kept me engaged in those sections was basically the continuing of Fitz's story and his struggles to break out of the cycles that he's identified with himself in Golden Fool. And some of those storylines were dropped once the quest to Aslevial kicks off. So, for instance, Hap leaves the story until Fitz returns, and I quite like the story between Fitz and Hap. The Fool is also gone for this section of the book. He's obviously going to come back in, and he's going to meet them on Aslevial again. I kind of, knew that was going to happen, but there's that stretch where the Fool is not there, and so there's no progressing that relationship. Ketrican is also gone. The Piebald storyline is put on halt. There's a lot of storylines that I found particularly engaging in Fool's Errand Golden Fool that were paused on this stretch of the journey. And I found myself missing those storylines and wishing those could come back. So I think that stretch of the book was a little hard for me. That said, things definitely pick back up once the characters reach Aslevial, and that storyline kicks in. I really enjoyed that. Although, that being said, I think I definitely enjoyed the building up of all of these story threads more than I enjoyed some of the resolution of things that happened in the storyline. So that's another reason that Fool's Fate wasn't as good to me as the other things. The second reason that that Fool's Fate is my least favorite of the 3 is that I wanted, and I know this is going to sound crazy because this book is already like almost 900 pages long, but I wish either one of 2 things. I wish that either there were just like 100 more pages at the end of the book to be able to make the pacing of the resolution of things a little bit slower and for us to sit with those things more. Or B, if you took some of those sections on the journey to Aslevial and you cut those down and put that page time toward the back end of the book, so that way we're not making this a 1,500 page book, but we're keeping it around the same. Because what I found was, what's really interesting about this book is that this book technically has a really long falling action where the finale basically takes place like 500, 600 pages deep into the book, and then there's like 250 pages of falling action. However, as much as I was excited about the falling action, because what I was really invested in was the resolution of Fitz trying to break these cycles, Fitz reuniting with old friends and seeing how they would work through those things. And I felt like some of those areas of the resolution I thought should have had more page time dealt towards them instead of what the falling action is spent on. So, not to say that everything is rushed. For instance, I think the ending between Fitz's relationship with him and the Fool is perfect, and there's a lot of page time dedicated to the resolution between Fitz and the Fool in the final 250 pages that is super emotionally resonant and incredible, and I'm going to talk about that later. However, there were other things that I felt like were definitely a little rushed because you got to the end of this book and we're already 850 pages in, and I feel like maybe Robin Hobb was like, all right, well, we kind of maybe need to speed this up. And so while I like the idea of a lot of the events in the ending, I think that I wish I spent more time developing those. And this is where we get into Fitz's reunion with Molly and him re-entering his relationship with her, because while this section of the book takes place over the course of a year, Robin Hobb and Fitz in his narration kind of speeds through it and only gives us one chapter of him courting, Molly's family and getting back in Molly's good graces again. And while the stuff that is there is really cute and really good, I wanted more of that. I wanted longer. And in fact, I think you can see this echoed in some complaints of reviews of Fool's Fate that I've seen, that people say this part of the book is rushed, or that they hate the relationship between Fitz and Molly. And I think that what contributes to that is the fact that of all the things that Hobb decided to spend a less amount of page time on, I think this is one of those areas that she should not have chosen to do that. I think she should have spent more page time on this section of the book, because I wanted a lot more of Fitz and Molly reckoning with their past than we got in the book. So I think I would have been more cool with Fitz and Molly ending up together if we had had more of them, basically working through some of their issues. And this gets into my third problem with Fool's Fate. And I've kind of gone back and forth on this on whether or not I think this is a problem. I think Fitz's reunion with Burrich is great, and there's a lot of great stuff with Burrich. And I on one hand love the way that Burrich dies, and I love that Burrich dying, it continues this theme of the cycles, right? The fact that because Burrich died, now Fitz has to take care of his children, like Burrich had to take care of him because Chivalry died. That is good, and him sacrificing himself to save Swift so that Swift can defeat the forged dragon is great. All that stuff. However, I do think it is kind of weird that once Burrich dies, that it almost frees Fitz to go up and pursue Molly, and it makes things easier for him. And I don't know how I feel about that either. I was really, once Fool's Fate was taking this direction where Fitz was definitely telling his family that he was back and that he was alive and his family was on their way home, and you knew that at the end of the book Fitz was going to have to reckon with what happened between Molly and Burrich and Nettle. Once Birch gets out of the picture, that becomes a lot easier for Fitz, and those three do not have to work through problems the way I was hoping it would. I was really interested to see what would happen when Fitz got back to Buckkeep and he and Molly and Birch had to talk through their past and talk through what happened and find a way forward. And I think Birch being removed from the picture was a little bit of a utility move on Robin Hobb's part to make that part of the resolution easier. And I don't know how I feel about that. I like that Birch dies and also don't like that Birch dies, because it's a good resolution for some things and it leads to a not as great resolution, in my opinion, for other things. So I think those were the three biggest issues I had with Fool's Fate. Everything else I thought was genuinely really good, and I really like where the ending leaves off here, and I like so much it's explored throughout the book. So even though this is my least favorite of the three, and I have some problems with it, it does not really stop me from saying, yes, this is this is the best fantasy trilogy I've ever read, because it's so emotionally impactful and it's such a good human drama, and it deals with so many incredible emotionally resonant themes that were really impactful for me, that brought me to tears in so many instances, that were so thought-provoking. I just could not put this book down. I think one of the reasons I maybe had a little bit of a problem in the second half of this book is that I read basically the last 400 pages in one day because I couldn't put it down. And I feel like I wish I had taken more time to just sit with what was going on and really reflect on it. And so when I reread this, I'm going to take my time with it and not rush through it now that I know the ending. But I feel like maybe it could be a me problem that I rush through this. But despite that, man, there's just some really great stuff in here. So I love how in my Fool's Errand video, I talked about how that book has to deal so much with change in life and how change is important and necessary and good. And then how the second book is all about cycles, identifying cycles through your life, breaking out of those cycles, trying to fix things, right? And cycles is such a fun theme because there's both the world-ending, world-saving cycles that the Fool, you have this on the macro magical world-saving scale, where the Fool is trying to save the world. He's trying to pull the world out of one bad cycle and into a proper cycle. But then that filters down to the personal drama that Fitz finds the generational cycles through his family, the people that came before him, the people that come after him. He realizes, he discovers generational trauma and empathy, and is trying to fix his children so that they don't make the same mistakes he did, so that he doesn't make the same mistakes his parents did. All that stuff is great. And then in Fool's Fate, what I think is tackled in this third book is really just love as an idea, but not just like love in general. I mean, like when we talk about the relationship between Fitz and Fool, what love means and what love really is. And I think there's a really interesting exploration here that Fitz has to learn that love, and he's been dealing with this through the whole trilogy, but that love is not something that is sexual in nature, right? Because this is something that Fitz really struggles with. The Fool loves Fitz, and Fitz has a hard time admitting and telling the Fool that he loves him, or letting other people see that he loves the Fool, because he thinks that, because they're not sexual partners, because he's not sexually attracted to the Fool, that he cannot love the Fool fully. And that's not true, right? Because love is more than attraction. Love is more than sex. And I think when you look at the relationship between the Fitz and the Fool, while I do think the Fool both loves Fitz and I think is sexually attracted to Fitz, um, that Fitz, it doesn't matter if there's no attraction on Fitz's part or not. That Fitz can love the Fool as much as the Fool loves him, and that they can completely belong to one another without it being a sexual or romantic in the way that we think of it in our modern times deal is. The Fitz and the Fool's relationship, and really what's explored here in Fool's Fate, is how love and brotherhood, and friendship are part of love, and how loving somebody and giving your all to them and giving your heart to them is so much more than sex, and sex doesn't have to be a part of it. And that's a barrier that Fitz has to get over. And by the end of the book, I think you can see him shed that element of, I think maybe, probably when we're reading it from a lens of maybe like a toxic masculinity mindset, the idea that like, oh well, we love people as friends, but we don't love people. That's kind of weird. Like, no, like that's not how it should be. Like, it's not a sexual thing. Love is so much more than that. And the Fitz and the Fool love each other so completely, and they give each other, their full heart, and they come together and they form, a such a relationship built on pure love. And it is such a heartwarming and wonderful story and exploration, I think. And I love that exploration. I love that Fitz was able to get past that. I love that Fitz was able to find out how to love the Fool. And I'm glad to say that I have friendships like the Fitz and the Fool have. With I have so many friends that I love so deeply, and I love with all of my heart, and I know that they love me. And that kind of brotherhood, that kind of friendship that you form with people, those kinds of things that you forge, for lack of a better word, with others, is so important, and it is so human. And I think it is so that's why it was so emotionally impactful for me, because the Fitz and the Fool remind me of the kinds of friendships that I have with a lot of my best friends. And I'm so glad that this wasn't the end of the series like it was originally planned, because the fact that Fitz and Fool don't really get to say goodbye to each other was super heartbreaking to me. And so I'm so glad that we get another trilogy and that they will reunite. And that made me happy, because if this was the last one and they never got to say their goodbyes, because at the end of the book, the Fool comes back and tries to say goodbye to Fitz, and everyone in Buckkeep thinks he either is dead or ran away, and the Fool is heartbroken. And I would hate that would be the last thing that the Fool had of Fitz. And so yeah, I just loved so much that exploration of love, and what it means, like what love actually means, to give your heart to somebody, to to be able to let other people in. And I love that so much. And it's why Fool's Fate, even though I had some structural issues with it, it's why it is still super emotionally impactful for me, and why I think it is still an incredible end to the trilogy. There's so much more to Fool's Fate. There's obviously more Realm of the Elderlings macro things going on here, with the dragons now returning to the world, and the plot with the Pale Woman, and the trip through Aslev. There's a lot of great stuff there. But I like I've done with my other two videos on the Tiny Man trilogy, I guess I'd like to really keep this focused on why these books impacted me so much. And as much as I could talk about the plotting and how all that came together, and some of the crazy cool, big action moments and big plot moments, all that stuff, basically just take it for granted that I think that stuff is good, because like Robin Hobb is an incredible writer, and she knows how to write a story, she knows how to plot a story, and all this stuff is great. But I want, when people look back at these three Tawny Man videos, I want people to look at like the things and the themes that impacted me, and that's why they stood out to me. And those themes are change and cycles and love. And when you take all three of these books together and you take these three themes and you put them together, which all three were explored throughout the series, I just have never been more emotionally impacted on a emotional human level than I have in this trilogy. The characters and the plotting and the magic and all that came together with these themes and this interpersonal drama that is exploring things that I am going throughout in my period of life right now. And so that's why I say the Time Man trilogy is the best fantasy trilogy I've ever read in my life right now, because it hit me at the, like I said in my previous video, hit me at the right time in my life to speak to things that I'm thinking about and dealing with directly in this time in my life. If I read the Farseer trilogy when I was Fitz's age and when I was coming of age, I think that I would feel about the Farseer trilogy the way I feel about the Tiny Man trilogy. But because I have moved past that point in my life and I'm at the point that Fitz is at in his life right now, that I was able to relate and understand and learn so much about myself and my life and those around me and appreciate things more than any other book that I've read. And so when all that is said and done, the Time and Trilogy is more to me than the plot progression or the structural or pacing issues in the third book, right? That I have. It's more than the world building and the magic systems and the plot. It's so much more than all that. All that stuff comes together and creates a very emotionally resonant and human interpersonal drama that explores, real human struggles and real things that people will go through at this stage in life. It's an exploration of this stage of life, and it was so powerful to me and it resonated with me deeply. And so it's for those reasons that the Tiny Man trilogy is the best trilogy, the best fantasy trilogy that I have ever read. I am just flabbergasted at how good this is. Genuinely, I think it's incredible. It's so good, and if you haven't read it, you should. Luckily, I still have two more series to go in the realm of the Elderlings. I will be taking a short break, and then I'll be hopping into the Rainwild Chronicles soon, and then I'll be doing the Fitz and the Fool, and I'm hoping to have this done by the end of the year because there are a bunch of other series I want to get to next year. So I'm hoping that this year I'll be able to wrap up the realm of the Elderlings, and I'm so excited to finish it. And if the other two series are as good as the three that I've already read, then this very well could be the best series I've ever read. I don't know yet. We'll see. I'm excited to see how the next two series shake out, especially because this was supposed to be the ending from what I have gathered. So we'll see how that plays out. I'm really excited. So right now I am rereading The Kingdoms of Death and Ashes of Man for the Sun Eater reread to get ready for Shadows Upon Time. I'm going to do a Will of the Many reread to get ready for The Strength of the Few. I'll probably do videos for those. And then I think I'm going to read some spooky books for Halloween. So some books that I haven't read before, and I might do videos for those. So stay tuned. And obviously, I will be doing more Realm of the Elderlings videos when I get to those books soon. So if that's what you're here for, stick around as you follow me through this journey through the Realm of the Elderlings. Until next time, guys. See ya.